Original Firefighter is the podcast and apparel brand that celebrates the heritage and traditions of the American Fire Service. Join us each week for lively discussions that aim to inspire, educate, and entertain, all in the effort to support mental health and well-being for first responders. Please subscribe, hit that bell, and follow us wherever you listen. Let's get into the show. Well, welcome to the show, folks. I am your host, Will Peterson. This is the Original Firefighter Podcast, and we have with us in the studio two special people. Both of them are going to be with us today, and we've got Andrea Cox from the Jaimie Cox Foundation, and we have Livia Bane from the Blue 815 Foundation. And so we're going to have a large conversation about, foundations and what they represent, and probably get some very personal things out on the table. But the point of us being here together today is to give our gratitude and respect to the blue. And I was challenged early on, if I had to pick one, the red or the blue line, which one was I going to pick? And I'm like, I don't want to pick. I don't want to choose.
We don't have to pick.
Yeah. Andrea and Livia, thanks for being on the show. And I just want to get right into it. Could you, Andrea, Livia, tell us a little bit about yourselves, if you will. Andrea, go ahead.
Sure. I am Andrea Cox. I am in life a teacher. And then I chair actually the Blue 815 organization. And then I help my family run the Jaimie Cox Foundation as well and help out with their events and things.
Yeah. Yep. And you said you're a teacher.
I am a teacher.
Okay.
Yeah. So also public service, just in a little bit safer fashion, I guess.
I don't know. Is it?
Not exactly, but.
What do you teach?
I teach middle schoolers, 6th and 7th graders.
Okay.
Reading.
So 6th and 7th graders reading.
Yep.
That's what you do.
That's what I do all day, every day.
That's a tough job.
It's a tough job.
Yes.
Yeah. Middle schoolers don't always like to read, so it's a challenge every day.
I'm going to stay on the red line, and you can keep doing that.
Right. Yes. And we're going to try to get them across the green line.
Oh, there you go. That's right.
So, yeah.
How long have you been a teacher?
This is my 15th year teaching.
Wow.
So I'm not quite at the halfway point yet, but we're counting.
Thank you for what you do. Thanks for keeping them, the 6th and 7th graders, on track to
try to keep them in line. Yeah.
It's a big job.
It's big.
Yeah.
Were you always wanting to be a teacher? Is that the path you had intended to, or did you kind of, I don't know, somehow other ways land on it?
I think when I look back, I probably did always want to be a teacher. Like when I was a little kid, I always played school with my dolls and, brought home all my workbooks at the end of the year and made all my fake students do work in those and had a grade book that wasn't actually a grade book. That was when teaching was a lot easier.
And kids then had to be more creative,
Yeah. And then I kind of denied that that's what I wanted to do for a while. I was in banking actually for 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. Well,
okay.
I kind of
made a big change.
Yeah. Well, I made my way through college, and after I graduated from Rock Valley, I knew I had to make a decision. So that's what I decided on, and I love it. It's pretty good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Wears you down just like any public service job does, but.
We'll come back to, I got a question for you about education as a whole, but I want Olivia, thank you for being on the show, and just tell us a little about yourself.
Sure. Well, I'm going to say I also am in the public service realm. I currently work for a statewide early childhood advocacy agency. And so we do a lot of support. Parents with children need childcare to be productive citizens, to go to work, et cetera. It's an economic factor. And so that's what I do in Winnebago and Boone County. And I've always kind of been in the public service realm and or early childhood. And spend a lot of my extra time volunteering for Blue 815.
She volunteers a lot.
Yeah, that's great.
She's involved in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, I do. I sit on the Village of McChesney Parks Public Improvement and Safety Committee.
Okay.
What else? Alignment Rockford. I'm involved there. And I've got 3 kids, twin 14-year-olds, boy and a girl. Yep. Mm-hmm. And a 7-year-old. A very fun.
Well, congratulations on the little tribe you got going on there, and all the advocacy that you do. Sounds like, to a degree, the both of you are now you're in the philanthropy, the philanthropy role, and appreciate all of that. We'll get into some of the differences and the correlations that go along. But, how do you Livia, how do you end up on all of these different types of groups and committees? Is it just that you began with one and then sort of just began to cross over to something else?
Yeah, I think, right away, I think of my grandfather. He was always invested in his community and just giving to people. And I think he just laid that foundation. And I've always just wanted to be a part of something better, stronger.
Sure.
Part of the community. And of course, in Blue 815 in particular, I've known Andrea since 4th grade. And so, it was just something I was obviously drawn to.
She jumped on board very quickly when I asked for her help on some of the projects we first started working on after Jaimie passed away. Mm-hmm. And she's been with me ever since on this interesting journey. And I mean, everything we do on both organizations is all volunteer time. So I'm forever grateful. I mean, she's got twins and a 7-year-old and works a full-time job and that's a busy life. And then to dedicate more to volunteering is huge.
Sure.
And I think just, all the people that I have with me, around me in my corner are huge about, what can we do in the local to improve things here? And I know you mentioned that on one of your episodes. I think just this last one I was listening to, we're all in this field of public service because we want to better our community in some way. So, we're trying to do what we can with what we have, and I'm forever grateful for her jumping on board with me for that.
Yeah, I mean, especially, again, I'm learning things as we do this, where you guys knew each other since the 4th grade, and now you're in it, you're in the thick of it together in your adult life, and really giving back to the community in the best ways you can. Mm-hmm. I think that makes for excellent individuals in our community. Mm-hmm. So thank you so much for what you're doing and the causes that you stand behind. So that's great.
Thanks.
To go back to the education part of it, I was just curious. So you've been doing it for 15 years. Mm-hmm. Can you just throw out what are the biggest differences and changes that you've seen when you began education, when you started your career to where you're at today? Big question, I know, but
yeah, I mean, in some ways it's exactly the same. I think the foundation of education is very much the same, and our goals in education. When we talk about, I'm a reading teacher, and the way we teach reading in the last 15 years has completely done a 180. We're back to what we call the science of reading is the big, phrase in education right now.
The science of reading.
Science of reading. So it really goes back to the way that we were taught to read. You learn phonics. You learn how the words, the letters go together to make sounds. You learn, how to spell. That's a big one. We're starting, I think, maybe to make a swing back to handwriting being something that needs to be a focus again, which, Yeah,
because, in the 6th and 7th grade, you're talking about junior high.
Yeah. It's, if you saw some handwriting that I see, it's rough because and I think
do they do that or do they do this?
Both. More this than this.
Right. Yeah.
Pandemic completely flipped education on its head, though. And that's where we really saw
how so
districts that had not yet been. So like my district, for instance, that I'm in right now, had not been fully implementing one-to-one technology, which means like a device for every student. That had just started when I joined, and I joined the year of the pandemic. So 2019, 2020 was my first year with this district. So I didn't even make it a full year in my building. But yeah, it's just, we had what we call a Chromebook cart in our classrooms, and students were required to turn in their Chromebooks every day at that point. So we did have every student on a device at the middle school level, but they weren't allowed to take those devices home. And now every kid has a Chromebook. They take it home. they're a disaster.
Not every kid had internet.
Not every kid had internet.
Right.
You know, and the pandemic burnt out a lot of educators. I think we're still recovering from that piece.
Interesting.
You know, in my district, we were teaching in person when we went back in the 2020-21 school year, in person and on Zoom. So I had, you know, a handful of kids on Zoom that I was trying to teach at the same time that I was teaching the kids that were physically present. And, you know, it's tricky because a lot of focus in education right now has to be like collaborative learning where you're working together, and the pandemic stopped that for a few years, you know, and you had some kids in younger grades where they're learning how school works, and we're still seeing the effects of like they didn't get to learn how school works.
Did it kind of put everybody and, you know, the students themselves like into these, like, I don't know, like a silo, like their own silo, you know?
Yeah, very much.
Okay.
I think, you know, you guys talk a lot about mental health on this show for first responders. Like the mental health of our kids is suffering greatly right now. And there are a lot of parents that know they need to get their kids help. And, you know, our social workers and our psychologists at schools are bombarded because they're required to meet the minutes of students with individualized education plans first. Mm-hmm. That, you know, is a requirement by law. And they don't have a lot of time in their day for kids that don't have those minutes, you know, directed towards them. So, you know, while we are lucky to have those people, we need more of them. And the funding just isn't there for it.
It sounds to me like, you just described that the pandemic created another pandemic.
Kind of, yeah.
You know,
I believe
that's what
did,
just,
yeah.
you know,
and I
presented
think
itself.
it's not just the pandemic that created that.
Right.
I mean, there's plenty of other outside influences that are, you know,
creating other problems and
right. But I do think, you know, we're seeing effects still, and I think we're going to for the next few years until it kind of irons itself out, and God knows what's going to happen in those few years. So
yeah,
I mean, you've got kids that are literally terrified to go to school because they hear all the violence that goes on, and you feel like it's more when rather than if.
Sure.
And that's scary for teachers and students. You know, you've got a lot of conversations happening that you really don't have a voice in.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing it, you know, and you know, Livia, to bring you in, is that because you said you also serve on some state committees or just local? Village.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we're looking at ways to, you know, combat the violence that is either real or perceived that we believe is going to happen, you know, how do you get involved with advocacy for strengthening a community and their belief system in education? Is there any way that you can lean into that?
You know, I think I'll default to my high school children on that. There's a school resource officer. There's two. And, you know, they're available to monitor, you know, to be there for conversations for kids, and I think bullying is a big part in what's happening out there. And so I think it's really important that we support having protection in our schools, and it's something we've talked a lot about at Blue 815, even how as an organization we can support keeping our kids safe. My daughter had an opportunity to interview the school resource officer at her high school. And so it's just, you know, we're trying to make those connections and let kids know that, you know, our school resource officers are there to serve and protect, you know, and to be that confidant when needed.
You know, it's interesting that you bring up the school resource officer. You know, that's become a title that just about every school, at least they either have it or they're trying to obtain it. But it's interesting, you know, at the end of the day, we're talking that it's a police officer, right? And so you look at what just happened in Madison, right, before the holiday, and you know, there was a school resource officer there. You know, to your point, Andrea, where these violent occurrences are happening, and so many of these facilities, they have somebody on site or they have measures in place to, you know, try to stop a perpetrator from coming in and doing the damage that they do. How are we doing? I mean, how do you guys measure that from where you're coming from? I mean, you're a school teacher and you're, you know, you advocate for children in your home communities. And so it's like, are we making it work, or are we falling short?
Well, I think we definitely need to do more. I'm in a middle school. My school district feeds into the high school district. We're all feeder districts up in that area. Their SRO is great. The one that retired, just recently, it was awesome. Developed great relationships with the kids. But we found out through our organization that, there are SROs that do not have the materials that they need to do what the response would require appropriately if something were to happen. So in my building, we are a pretty long building. So the hallway, I don't know how many feet it is, but it's very long from one end to the other. And we have a pod of classrooms on one side of the building. Then we have like the gym and the office and the lunchroom and everything in the middle. And then we have another pod of classrooms that mimics on the other side. So they're mirroring each other. We are kind of out in the middle of nowhere at my school. We don't have an SRO designated to our school, but, luckily we've made great relationships with the police department and the county sheriff's office, and they make stop-throughs our building regularly.
Yeah. And if you don't, is that a school choice to not have one, or what's the steps on getting one?
I don't know that I could speak on that.
Okay.
I don't know that it's been a conversation. I think we probably just feel pretty safe at this point with our clientele and the community we're in. I don't know exactly, but I think funding has to come from the district partially for that. I don't know how much. I don't know if they have to fund an entire officer's salary or how that works.
Sure.
But that definitely, I would guess, comes into play. But, we did find out when an officer had come through our building who had just recently, taken on a new role. And he was like, if something were to happen here and we came in this end of the building, we don't have a rifle in the car to reach the other end of the building if we needed to.
Right.
And so that prompted a project. And we did provide some funding so that our SROs, at least in our area, covering, I think, 4 schools. Mm-hmm. We talked through, we worked on one, and then they got some funding for the others. But, they do now have what they need in their vehicle should they have to respond to a school and something's happening and it's a hallway situation like ours would be. Right. Whereas before they didn't, and I wouldn't have thought that they didn't,
I think
you just assume they've got what they need.
I think that the general public would assume the same things. Mm-hmm. And, I think that, again, not just to use one example because there's so many to pick from. Mm-hmm. Others, some situations rise to the top very quickly. Almost everybody references Columbine. Mm-hmm. And I can remember, back in the day when I was starting my career in the fire service, Columbine happened pretty early, in 1995, I believe it was. And it set the stage for a lot of things that were to come to where we're at today. Mm-hmm. And now we've had, so many others, right? We can continuously name a bunch. Sandy Hook comes to mind always. One of the latest ones in Uvalde, Texas, and all those things. And we can tout, the success stories, and we can also criticize failures in the system. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, we are talking about people who are losing their most precious loved ones in some way, shape, or form, whether it be the children themselves, whether it be someone within the school system, a teacher, a principal. Mm-hmm. But when that happens at those targets, which they are to the evil person, those places are targets, and the ripple effect, the things that become criticized. You should have known better. You should have had this in place. You should have known that. And the thing of it is that so many times we don't know what we don't know. Right. You bring up that, you look at a hallway and you're like, we thought that you'd be able to, take out an assailant that was at the end of the, it's like, no. Mm-hmm. My handgun doesn't reach that far.
Or
if they don't even have that.
When there's children around. Right. Exactly. That's the other piece. Is like it might, but it also brings more risk to kids that are around, and you're trying to minimize innocent lives, right?
Absolutely.
So that's been interesting. And then, I know they were also provided some shields from different donors when that project was done. And I know both Blue 815 and the Jaimie Cox Foundation helped out with, providing some funding for that. And, it's just interesting that, we are two organizations that came into play, just 5-6 years ago. What happened before, what organizations were out to support things that funding didn't allow for before.
Right.
Those are things we don't, make super public that we're providing funding for all the time. But, it's just one way that we're getting involved to help in the community and in education, it ties to me, becomes personal to me because that's my job. And I want whoever's responding if something happens at my building to be prepared.
I think that we should, take a minute to, go back to Livia, what you had said about just volunteering and being the best person that you can be for your community. It is astounding how many entities, we'll use the schools as the example, but how many entities they benefit from the volunteerism. It's not from local, state, and federal government only that you get these things, these items, or the education or the need, the shields, the items that they need to stop the threat. But it does come from the volunteerism, which actually makes you feel the best.
Yeah, it takes a community to make a community safe. And I think a lot of our volunteers go unnoticed, and that's the way, it should be.
Right.
They're not doing it to, receive accolades and just, of the volunteer firefighters at, our local fire stations that, are there overnight, just volunteering their time in case my house catches on fire and, I need help getting out or saving my kids. It's necessary for a community to be successful, to have people that care and put their best foot forward to help.
And invest in public service,
Specifically.
Has to be. And one other thing we've done too, so one of our board members is a retired police chief, Roy Bethke. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he has done a lot in our community with training for these type of major responses. I don't know if you've ever been involved in any of the classes he's done, but we volunteered as victims for an active response training that brought together from all over our community, police, fire, 911, paramedics, and we did some role playing in one of the training buildings that they have for the county. And the very first incident that we did was a school shooting response. I got to be the teacher that was shot.
Oh no.
Which was not fun. We made light of it, but
it's even hard to pretend to play the victim.
Yeah. But it was so eye-opening when we've actually participated in that twice. A couple different of us were available for different ones, but just it's so enlightening to see how well in our community all of our responders are working together and are training together so that, and we've had a couple of incidents where you've all had to come, be on scene. And we know law enforcement's going in first to clear the building and make it safe for the rest of you guys to come in and do what needs to be done to triage and handle a situation like that. And, it's just eye-opening to me playing a victim in that situation where, I knew, I was supposed to play dead and, a couple other people were supposed to be injured that were around me. And when the police came in, they were not coming to check on us first. That was not their first priority. And at the time, I wouldn't have thought that. I would have thought they're looking to see who they can start helping.
Yeah,
but no, they got to eliminate the threat first,
right.
And then everybody comes in and does what they're supposed to do. So it was just an eye-opening
that's
thing.
the evolution of all of this. And again, we have acknowledging that it's hard to believe that we have to do this.
Yeah.
I've said on previous shows that when I entered the fire service and in fact, going way back, 1991, I lived in the 1900s.
Same. Weird thing,
great?
isn't it?
I love saying that.
I just saw a thing the other day that said 1980.
Yeah.
and 1936 are the same distance and time that we are right now, from 1980 to now.
Wasn't it you on your show, 25 this way, 25 that way now?
Yeah. I've got I got 25 years in the 19th century, or the 1900s, sorry, the 20th century, and then 25 years in the 21st
You're very
century.
experienced in life.
It's very old for those kids.
It
if
is.
you lived in
It is.
1900s.
Correct. Yeah.
And I still know how to use my BlackBerry. I'm sorry, my smartphone.
Your Nokia.
My Nokia, right? You can obviously date ourselves on the show a bit, but what we are talking about is the modern time, and the modern time it has evolved from what I referenced was Columbine, and I'm sure that there can be somebody that can comment on the show where it's like, well, it really began back to Kent State University.
Yeah.
It's all horrible because what we have is individuals in society that are hell-bent on, doing carnage and damage to those who just want to live a good life.
Yeah.
And what to define what a good life is, I think we've said it is, yes, you're probably going to be born in this world. You're going to hopefully get some good education at some point. You're going to hopefully land on a career that you can enjoy. And not everybody does, but they find other ways to enjoy life. You can volunteer. We've hit that a lot, and we're going to talk about even more of that. But ways to give back, and you always end up being a better person when you find that way to give back. We have in this conversation, we've identified that we're having to give back to a really, a bad situation that just continues. We see it every day playing out in some way, shape, or form. We've obviously just recently had the New Orleans terrorist attack. We've had the person, again, that on the same day, which it is a coincidence apparently, but in Vegas and the Tesla truck and the Trump Tower. So all that playing out, right? And then, having it also kind of fall back mostly, it's to these targets of our education, getting at the elementary schools and the middle schools, the high schools, and so on. And we're sitting here scratching our heads going, well, how do we get our arms around this? Can we even do that?
Right.
In a free society? Let's insert that, because this is the whole point about being in this great nation of ours is you are a free person. You have the rights and liberties that so many others do not around the world. And that's what we're trying to keep. And so there's that balance of what are we willing to sacrifice versus what are we willing to stand and say, what's the hill that we're willing to die in and say, no, we're not giving up these liberties and these freedoms.
Right.
And that I think is the greater conversation to be had again at the local level, state and federal level, and being sure that good people are not giving up their freedoms for the sake of, the fact that some people are wanting to do the worst things of the worst to us.
I think too, it's hard to think of it as you're saying, like this huge countrywide, maybe worldwide problem. I know it doesn't happen in every other country, but it's the same with like the low morality for our law enforcement officers, the disrespect for the authority of law enforcement officers. Like when I look at the nationwide problem we have with that, it's like overwhelming. Like I have no idea where to start. I don't know how to fix this problem.
Right.
We're not going to fix it in this hour. We're not going to fix it, tomorrow. But, I think that's where I have to say, like, what I can do in my local is I can run this organization that works to make sure our law enforcement officers know they're supported. I can get out what we're trying to do. I think if our first responders, especially our law enforcement officers, because they get a little bit more flack than everybody else, feel supported, they're going to do a better job, right? They're going to want to go to work. They're going to feel more connected to their community. And, I also think, from the job that I do, something I tell my students a lot, and we talk about a lot, is there are consequences for every single action you do. And those consequences aren't always negative. Like there are also positive consequences. If you do your homework, your positive consequence is that you don't get nagged at by me. I don't have to send an email to your parents that you didn't do your work. If you don't do your homework, you've got a negative consequence then. I'm nagging at you about it. I'm sending an email home till it gets done. Maybe you're going to end up with lunch detention. It's something as simple as that, understanding that every action comes with a consequence of some sort, and it might not feel like it comes with a consequence. Like, if I'm not nagging at you because you didn't do your homework, that's a good thing, but you might not notice it. And I think we are really across the board on things lacking in understanding that there are consequences, and actually giving out consequences when something needs, to have that, regardless of what they might be. It might be something as simple as a phone call or an email. It might be you're spending some time in jail, or you're paying a fine or whatever it might be. But for me, like, those are things we can start handling in our own community to make sure things like that don't happen in our community,
right.
And I think when I look at that scale, that's more manageable than this huge countrywide, nationwide issue that we have.
This episode of the original Firefighter Podcast is brought to you by Benny's Slots, Wine, Spirits, and Empire Gaming. With 3 locations serving the Rockford area, in Roscoe, McChesney Park at Nest, and Cherry Valley at the Harley-Davidson store, Benny's is the place with taste and enough luck to go around for everyone, provided by Empire Gaming. Each location offers fun and entertainment with weekly sports, events, drawings, and live music in a plush environment. As a side note, I recently had my retirement party this past summer at Benny's at Nest in McChesney Park, and they gave us the VIP experience all around. For the best atmosphere, for the best entertainment, head to Benny's for good drinks, good friends, and good times. Stop in at a Benny's location near you today. We're going to make an adjustment on the conversation, which is just going into what has been sacrificed, personally. And that would be, to have a conversation about Jaimie Cox and his sacrifice. So, would you just mind to start by telling us a little bit about Jaimie?
Yeah. So Jaimie is my cousin. Incredible person. Our dads are triplet brothers. So, there's 2 boys and a girl. So obviously the boys are twins. And we just grew up in the Roscoe area. We've spent our whole lives together. We were very close because our dads were so close. So we spent, Christmas morning together every year when we were little kids. And Jaimie was closer in age with my brother. And so Jaimie is 5 years younger than me. My brother's 7 years younger than me. And so he and my brother were very, very close as they were growing up together. He is a military veteran. He was in the Army National Guard, served overseas for a year in his time with the National Guard, and lost some of his guys over there that had a big impact on him and his life, and still has an impact on ours because we've kind of taken on, what he no longer can do to honor them. He wanted to be an officer when he came home and went, to school. He went to Northern. His goal was to end up being a DNR officer, and he faced some challenges through his schooling, but eventually made it. That was his first in with policing. He was with the conservation police for the state of Illinois. So his dream job, essentially.
He was a big outdoorsman, wasn't he?
Big outdoorsman.
Yeah.
Loved hunting, fishing. Fishing was his thing for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Loved everything as simple as mowing his yard. He was the guy that one of my last memories of him is him coming around at his new house on his lawnmower, just super pumped with wood for the fire he was going to have. They were having a housewarming party and just so proud to come around on his ride on tractor,
Yeah.
So yeah, that job just fit him. He was dating his wife at the time, and they were, eventually got married and wanted to settle down, and there was nowhere for him to be placed for the DNR. So he was working out of Ogle County and living at our grandparents' house, actually. So our grandparents lived in Mount Morris, Illinois. And so he was kind of serving that area on the DNR. And because he wanted settle down, like they wanted to buy a house and have some kids. And, he started looking at, other places to apply and considering other options. And my brother was on the Rockford Police Department. So he, of course, like reached out to my brother, and my brother's like, Don, like you are in your dream job. Why would you make this change, And, eventually, my brother was very supportive of whatever he wanted to do. He knew Jaimie wanted a little bit more action. He was a little bit bored. He was frustrated with not being placed. And he was sworn into the Rockford Police Department in December of 2016 and bought a house with his wife up in South Beloit. I think it was like February of 2017 they bought their house. And so they were finally kind of getting situated, and he had done a lot of renovations in his house. He loved woodworking and construction. Having a house to kind of make his own was right up his alley, and he was doing a great job with it before everything took a turn.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and I have to, say I didn't directly know him, but your brother, I've, been on the Rockford Fire Department for a long time. And so I would see your brother on the streets and, just in that passing, which, kind of was always like a head nod or, something like that. Like, hey, I appreciate that you got my back. And, we would always do what we could, for firefighters and paramedics. If there was ever a police officer that was needing our attention or help, I mean, they took priority. I can say it very, very clear. They take priority.
My brother was actually fire before he became police. So he was Harlem Roscoe.
Oh,
he went through the Explorers program when he was in high school.
Yeah. And
then he joined the Army as well, following Jaimie. And then he was with Harlem Roscoe for a super long time. Actually, law enforcement was never on the spectrum for him. He randomly applied to Rockford, and once he got pretty far in the process, he told us, I think I might end up becoming a police officer. He had just graduated from college with his biology degree and was working, I don't even know, some company up in Madison. And we were like, what? Like, where is this coming from? And yeah, he became an officer. So now is up to the detective role. So
congratulations to him.
Yeah. And it's just so, when he was a firefighter, Harlem Roscoe up until recently has been a volunteer department. Right. I remember he would always volunteer to work like the holidays, like Christmas Day, he was going to work so that somebody who had kids could, be at home with their kids. Well, he didn't have any. And so I would always make, breakfast to go drop off at the department because he was working. And, I did that every Christmas for many years. Because he would always be at work and there was nothing else for us to do since we had already celebrated our family Christmas or we're going to later. And it's just so interesting how it just all played out. And now, bringing treats and baked goods and all the things to the police department is something I regularly do, and not even because he's there. But I can remember, like we would know like a big fire was going on or a big accident happened, and you're always nervous if they're out on a call or something big's going on, but it wasn't ever something when he was on the fire department that we thought a lot about, like the reality of what could happen. When he moved, into law enforcement, we went downstate for his graduation. I remember the guy who was in charge of the program kind of talked to the families and let us know, like, you need to make sure that they do stuff still. They need to hang out with their friends that are not cops. They need to hang out with the family. Don't let them say no, and all these rules. And we were just kind of like, okay, whatever. Didn't really understand it. And now, before Jaimie, we were not the family that wore blue line things.
Sure.
We were not, I probably couldn't even have told you what the blue line was before the morning of November 5th, 2017. I knew, but
now it's tattooed on your heart.
I didn't know. Now it's tattooed literally on my body.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
And I don't think we always talk about how like the blue line threw up in our family. Like it literally did. Everything we have is now blue line and not by our choice. if we could go back, we'd just go back to just being a normal family that our guys just went to work,
Right. Yeah.
The morning that everything happened, my brother, so Jaimie and my brother worked the same area, just my brother worked nights, Jaimie worked days. And so when the call went through, everyone thought it was my brother because Jaimie had not been on the department very long either.
And this is November 5th of 2017.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. My brother was at home. They had just bought a house and they had their first kind of weekend. My nephew was actually with my mom and I was hanging out over there. And there's a picture of me and my nephew that my mom took when I was over at her house the night of the 4th. That now when I scroll back in my pictures, like that is the dividing line of my life is that picture. And I don't really remember. I don't remember what life was like before.
Right.
Before this defined so much of who I am. And when I got the call, my brother called. It was, I don't know, somewhere around 3 a.m. It was also a weird night because it was time change night. I thought, I kind of, when you're in the middle of the night, you're like flustered, the phone's ringing, answering. I'm thinking he's at work. And I'm thinking, because he wasn't saying anything. And I was like, what's wrong? And I'm going through my head like, no, he didn't work tonight. So then I'm like, is he out drinking? Are you drunk? Do you need a ride? What's going on? And, he said the words like, Jaimie got shot at work. And that's all he said. And I was, immediately I'm up out of bed. What do we need to do? Is he okay? And he didn't really say anything. Just said you need to get to the hospital. And so I think we were all just immediately probably in a state of shock at that moment. When we've all got the call, I called Jaimie's sister and an officer in Beloit where she lived had already come to pick her up. She was on her way. I called my aunt. In my mind, we just needed to round our family up. We needed everybody we could get to be there, to support Caitlin and everybody, whatever's going on. And so the only thing he said on the phone was, you won't be able to get down State Street. You're going to have to come a different direction. We're at St. Anthony.
Right.
So my aunt came and picked me up. And actually, I just did this the other day for the first time since that morning. But I got in my aunt's car. She came pick me up. She's like, I'll be there in 5 minutes. Don't drive by yourself. She comes and picked me up. And I sit in her car and I have my TV remote in my hand. And I'm like, oh, this is dumb. Why did I bring this? I had turned on my TV for my dog before I left. And the other day I walked out of my house and got in the car and had my remote in my car in my hand. And I was like it just took me back instantly, to that moment. Like, I haven't done that since that morning, because I did the same thing. Turned on the TV for my dog before I left. So yeah, I was just, once we got there and realized what had gone on and, it was like everyone there had thought it was my brother and my brother had gotten the call. People are calling him like, why aren't you answering your radio? Why aren't you answering your radio? And he's like, I'm at home, and it didn't even really click to him, I don't think, from what he said, until he left the house. He's like, obviously something's going on. We got to go. But he's the one that had to make all the calls, and I will never know how that impacted his life, other than what he's shared. But, you talk about the mental health of first responders. Like, I know that had to have a huge impact on the way he does his job now and his everyday life, because receiving the phone call has an impact on my everyday life.
Right. And just to be clear, so your brother and Jaimie, you're saying they worked the same shift. Same area. Mm-hmm. But Jaimie was a daytime officer.
Yep.
Your brother was a nighttime officer.
Yep.
But he was off that night.
My brother was off that night, and Jaimie had picked up overtime after his daytime shift was over. Yeah, because this incident, it happened late into the night, beginning as a traffic stop. Correct. Yeah. So routine traffic stop, right? Which I hate that phrase because it's not ever routine. It could go wrong at any moment, which we see all the time. And he was not shot. We actually didn't know until, I'd say probably 24 to 48 hours later what had actually happened. He did not get shot. He was caught on this person's vehicle, and person took off from the traffic stop with him attached to the truck somehow. There was evidence in the findings of the investigation that Jaimie had attempted to push the brake to stop the truck, and the brakes were not working.
Okay.
And then the truck rammed into a tree and threw him.
Right.
So, the call I got was Jaimie got shot at work, because that's what we all thought. Nobody even corrected us at the hospital, which I think is interesting still. But no, he was not shot.
Right. So and that the one thing I'll say is that, one of the things that we talk about on this podcast, and one of the things that Original Firefighter stands for, is the inherent risk that goes along with, joining the service of police work, the fire service, EMS. We know that there's a risk, mm-hmm. and we hear comments that come in, and it's like, well, you knew that there was a risk, and it's like, mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a risk at every turn in our lives. And then those of us that do go off into, some sort of public service, and we've had a greater discussion to kind of tie this back into the beginning of the overall conversation, was we've already talked about how there's risks at every level, and teachers have risks, and the students have risk. And now we're being really specific about Jaimie, and there is no routine, right? I mean, first of all, that's part of our training is don't train for routine. Mm-hmm. Everything is supposed to be about a heightened awareness. And that's just the first steps, and again, I am not a police officer, so I'm not here to walk that walk. I can assume that something was seen, Jaimie went into action and said, well, I need to correct this. Mm-hmm. And the outcome was the worst outcome. Yep. And it did change, lives forever. Many lives. Many lives of definitely everybody who knew him, but so many people who didn't, whose lives are affected every day, and we still hear stories, of things that have come out of all of the terrible good things that have come out of it. People who had encounters with him, simple encounters, like, I've gotten pulled over a couple times, and I probably couldn't tell you who pulled me over. I know one. But people remembered him, and I think like people are recounting like they were like pulled over by him. Pulled over. Or he answered a call to my house. We got so many at the very beginning. They still trickle in from time to time, but there was one of a prostitute in Rockford who reached out, through Messenger. We had like the Jaimie Cox Memorial Fund page on Facebook, so a lot of people messaged through that. That has now become the Jaimie Cox Foundation. But, she reached out to say, I had an encounter with him, and he told me I could be more. And since this is, this was like a couple of months later since this has happened, I moved out of Rockford, and I'm now working this job, and I'm doing great. And I'm just thinking, like, how awesome that she felt she could reach out and tell us this story, and like tell us how, his loss, and knowing and positive interaction she had with him, which I'm sure not every everybody's encounter with the police is positive, especially in her situation, impacted her life. We had another one reach out, my son was autistic, and we had to call the police, and, Jaimie came in and calmed him down, and, just like so many cool interactions that we got to hear about. Somebody from the Winnebago County Animal Control had stopped to see if he needed help on a call, and, reached out to tell us about his interaction with him, which was not long before everything had happened. And, just so many cool stories we got to hear that I just think speaks volumes to him as a person, the person he was, why we feel the need to carry on his legacy and carry on, the good person that he was, because he needed more time. He deserved more time. Yeah. I mean, the way you described him in the beginning there, I mean, he was already larger than life. You know, when if you,
but not like, not just your average everyday guy too. You know, like he's become larger than life, I think. And
well, the larger,
he would probably not love that, but we always joke like he'd be so annoyed with how many t-shirts have his name on it.
I'll let you kind of, you know, explore his persona, you know, but the fact that he was already, you know, he had given time to the military, and, you know, you did mention that he had already seen loss, you know, coming back home, knowing that he wanted to give to the DNR. And that in of itself, I mean, I've done my research, the DNR officers, they have it pretty tough. There's not very many of them.
Nope.
And I remember once reading that, you know, the issue with DNR is that every time you come upon somebody, most of them have a weapon. You know, they're hunters and things of that nature. So there's always kind of the
added risk.
You know. But then for him to decide that he was going to shift to a metropolitan, you know, city, and here we are in the city of Rockford, and it's just, again, I mean, I know we've already covered the fact that it's not a routine stop. The general public would say, okay, so it's a routine. The news media would publish it as, it was a routine stop, and it became anything but that.
Yep.
And so then now, as you walk through that, and not to, you know, labor on the days and the weeks after, how was the support that came out of that from either the city
at the time?
Yeah, at the time, yeah. What was that looking like? Was it too much, or was it right on point?
I definitely don't think it was too much.
Okay.
I've been in, you know, I've gotten to know a lot of people. Like when we went through all of the memorial services the following year at the state and country level, there were people there. So the Illinois chiefs of police have like a dinner for, you know, fallen officers' families and departments. And I remember sitting at that one, and Rockford had bought 2 tables, you know, to bring us and the honor guard and everybody, and did it right. I will say they did a lot of things right. There was somebody sitting at our table that Lieutenant Watton walked up because their department didn't even show up for them. You know, they weren't even there to walk them up to get their officer's police cross that's awarded to you because your officer died, you know, and their department didn't even show up. And that hit me. You know, at that moment, I was so appreciative for everything the Rockford Police Department had done for us. And there was plenty that we would have liked to have gone differently.
So just to be clear, so at this dinner that was honoring
the fallen officer of 2017.
Yeah. So you're saying that there were departments that didn't have representation?
Correct.
And so,
like, the families were there without their officer's department.
Oh man. Good Lord.
You know, to me, that wouldn't even be an option. And I can tell you, I would be screaming from the rooftops if that had been our situation, you know, but
hell yeah,
it was not ours. Ours represented us well.
Sure.
And held us up, you know, that the support from our department was great. The city was as supportive as I believe they can be. I remember, so Mayor McNamara's, I know him on a personal level. I'm very good friends with his sister-in-law. He was the first person I saw when I walked out of Jaimie's hospital room. And I remember just falling into his arms. And I guess I didn't really understand it in that moment. Like I said, like that morning was when the blue line became something I understood as a physical concept, because I walked out of that room. I got to the hospital and didn't know we had lost him. I thought there was still a chance, right? And when they wheeled him out, covered with the flag, every officer that could possibly be there, and there were some in plain clothes that probably woke up out of their sleep, just like my brother did, stood at attention. And many members from the city were there as well, which I'm grateful for. They should be there, regardless of any political, they should be there, you know. And they were, and I'm forever grateful for that. And I remember, you know, I was holding on to Caitlin, and I watched tears just streaming down the faces of these men and women who wear this badge and, you know, are intimidating to most people and even to me sometimes. And in that moment, they were all humans. And they are behind that badge, and they were there from that moment, you know, and still are, many of them. So, I think the support was incredible from our community. I remember I told him I'm kind of like fascinated with the Kennedy family. And I remember just telling my mom one day, like, I think it was actually when we were driving from the funeral home to the church, because we had a private family funeral before the public visitation. It was this very long day, but I'm so glad we had that time. And I remember driving with my mom, and I just told her, like, you know, there's news everywhere, recording, and like it felt on a small scale, like John F. Kennedy's funeral, you know, like, and there's a picture of Caitlin and my brother standing the morning of the funeral that the Rockford Register-Star had published, and like it just reminds me of so much of like that iconic moment of the Kennedys standing there saying goodbye to him, you know. And
I get what you're talking about. Much
smaller scale, but it was just something that I could have never thought we would experience. And looking back, I'm just forever grateful. And I do, one of the reasons that what we started is, you know, I had a conversation with a state trooper who was standing at one of like the intersections or something at that time. And he was like, man, like we didn't even know we were supported like this in this community. And I'm thinking, like, how could you not know that you're supported, and how could you ever be made to feel that way? And that bothered me so much. And I'm so grateful that the community came out and made sure that they know that they're supported, you know, above anything, not just for Jaimie, but for all of them. And all of you guys, you know, I mean, all first responders need to feel our support. I just know law enforcement gets a lot more wrath than other fields do.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Well, I mean, you did touch on the, we can say it real plainly that there's a great disrespect for law enforcement out there. There's this attitude in our, you know, society that, you know, no one can tell us what to do, you know, and there's this like idea that, you know, a person with a badge has authority, which they do. I mean, by proclamation, by sworn authority, you do have, you are instilled with the right to command law. And it's not to infringe. Let's be clear. It's not supposed to be about infringing upon the civil liberties that we've already kind of, you know, touched on very lately. But the idea is we are a society of laws. And it goes back to, you know, the beginning of the conversation. You talk about our young, our you know, the middle schoolers that you're helping to learn to read, to write, to get back to the basics of life, of being a decent person. And this is a reflection of the loss of Jaimie is a reflection of build the best community around the worst situations.
Yeah.
And if we can do that, then we're doing the best for Jaimie going forward. So to that note, I mean, I'd like you to discuss and Livia as well that, you know, what does the Jaimie Cox Foundation and what is Blue 815? What do they represent today based out of this loss?
Do you want me to go or you want to go first?
Go ahead.
Okay. Go ahead. So take back to the support and then I'll kind of take it from there. So there's an organization, it's nationwide, but in Illinois, we have our own chapter called COPS, which is Concerns of Police Survivors. So we have Illinois COPS. Didn't know these people existed, didn't know this organization existed until the evening of November 5th when I showed up over at Caitlin's house, and these people had swooped in. I remember they had her on the back patio, and I'm thinking like, who are these people? And they're from Illinois cops. And this organization swoops in when there is a line of duty death for law enforcement and literally pick us up off our knees. They are angels. We would have had no idea what the heck we were getting into without them. You mentioned, I don't think it was when we were recording yet, but that you were involved in the procession from the coroner's office to the funeral home after Jaimie passed away. So they did a procession from the hospital to the coroner's office. That morning we watched them leave. Again, no idea what the heck was going on, but we were like, wow, this is amazing, We didn't realize the scope of what it means to have a line of duty death at all. Not at all. And so we're kind of learning it, as we go, of course. And cops let us know that they're going to be a procession from the coroner's office to the funeral home. You're welcome to go. So we're thinking we're going to go put out lawn chairs on the corner, and what corner should we go to? Where would be the best spot for us to stand, And even my brother, he's like, yeah, we'll probably pick a spot, I guess, and what time should we leave? No, you guys are going to go in the procession, right. And so we did, we drove our own car. We could have ridden in squad cars if we wanted to, but we drove together in our own car. And I remember that was the moment where I actually said to my brother, there are people of every race, every socioeconomic status standing out here along this route. I mean, it was packed with people. Every intersection blocked off by the fire department, the tow trucks, a scope of something I'd never seen before. And I've seen far too many times since, unfortunately. And so anyways, cops let us know every step we needed to do along the way. We all had our liaison, Jaimie's side had a family liaison. Caitlin's side had a family liaison. We've been very good about remaining together as a family, which doesn't always happen with these kind of things. And as we kind of went through the week, when we got to the final procession after the funeral, we get in the car and they have, all of the family is placed in a certain squad car and officers driving all of us in the procession. And there's these little care packages in the back seat. Bottle of water, some chips, gum, some mints, tissues, which was unfortunately something that was forgotten far too often at some of the things we went to. And you're crying your eyes out and have no tissue, And so that stuck in my mind. And so there's all these bits and pieces coming together. About a week after the funeral, somebody reached out to me and wanted to see if I was interested in working on a project to rename the Morgan Street Bridge as the Police Memorial Bridge, which is actually the picture that's on the back of my sweatshirt. Mm-hmm. The Morgan Street Bridge was lit up blue. Jaimie passed away on a Sunday. On Tuesday night, there was a candlelight vigil there that many of us went to. The department sent people there to support us, make sure we felt safe. All week they made sure we were covered, felt safe. And that bridge stuck out, that moment of the community, all these people we didn't know coming together to support us and lift our family up and remember Jaimie was very impactful. And so I was like, yep, I'm on it. What do we need to do? I needed a place to put my energy. So I got involved with the Morgan Street Bridge petition.
Right.
Drug Livia into the mix for this. We spent a few months getting signatures to rename the Morgan Street Bridge as the Police Memorial Bridge. We talked with City Council. We spoke at City Council. Each of us spoke, and along with another one of our board members, took our 3 minutes to speak.
Which is not enough.
Not enough. And I learned a lot in that process, just about local government and Robert's Rules of Order. I just wanted to sit and talk with our city council members in a room and explain to them what we wanted to do. They seemed offended by what we wanted to do and the way we were going about it. But I've never done anything like this before. I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm just putting my heart and soul where I feel it needs to go. And you can't talk to your city council members unless it's a public meeting, you know?
Right.
Even more than 2 of them together. And that was my request. I just want to talk to you guys. And I couldn't. I tried to talk to as many as I could one-on-one. We didn't win the bridge petition, but that's how we grew into Blue 815. So while it was a really hard pill to swallow that we were not going to make that happen, and I still think to a certain extent it should have been, you know, made to happen. We've grown into something bigger, and we've put a lot of effort into community involvement and being a bridge between law enforcement and the community, and making sure our law enforcement officers are supported and, I don't know,
seen as humans.
Seen as human, yeah. And that's Blue 815. I'll let you, because that's kind of where you're
ahead.
in the mix, Liv.
Go ahead, Livia.
Yeah. So, you know, we spend a lot of our time just humanizing, you know, those people who have chosen to go into this public service, dangerous position. And there's a lot of ways we do that now, whether it's, you know, our Holidays with Heroes events where we partner up a member of Gigi's with a officer and they do the shopping. It's the whole point of everything we do is to bridge the gap. You know, that bridging word is actually, you know,
Key.
has a lot of meaning for us because it's where we started.
To the Morgan Street Bridge
Yeah. Yep.
movement. Yeah.
So it's one of, like,
Sorry,
that's our...
go ahead. This episode of the original Firefighter Podcast is sponsored by Castle Contracting. Castle Contracting offers commercial and residential restoration, leading the industry in roofing, residential siding, gutters and downspouts, egress window installation, storm damage assessment and repair, and solar energy, saving you money and time. If you want to be treated like royalty, contact Castle Contracting to schedule a free inspection. Call them at 877-512-4207 or go online and visit castleexteriors.net. That's 877-512-4207 or go online and visit castleexteriors.net. Serving Illinois, Wisconsin, and Kentucky, Castle Contracting has you covered. Your home is your castle. Call Castle Contracting today.
That's one of our things on the back of our business cards is bridging citizens and law enforcement. And we put that because the bridge is how we started.
I got you.
You know.
I got you.
So
Go
that's what we do. You know, we spend our time, you know, whether there's an emergency, how can we support the first responders that are doing what they do, you know, responding in crisis. And when we have time to plan, we try to plan for events where we can bring community members together in various methods. Sometimes it involves canines. Sometimes it involves shopping. But, you know, we tried to do our best to get the message out about here are the individuals in our community they're serving you, and here's how they're doing that.
Well, and one of the pushbacks that we got from the bridge was because there's the 9/11 memorial already, right? And I didn't know what the 9/11 memorial even was when we started that. Like I said, I was very naive to a lot of things. And that's how I met you.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, when Jaimie's name was added to the memorial, and, you know, coincidentally, that's now a place I visit twice a year. I visit it during Police Week on Police Memorial Day, May 15th, and I visit it on November 5th every year. And maybe you don't want to know this, but I do sit and have a beer with Jaimie at the memorial.
Of course I want to know that.
Both of those 2 days
of course I do.
Of the year.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, every November 5th, we take Jaimie's favorites, snacks, baskets to the Rockford Police Department districts in the morning. So I make my rounds. Sometimes people come with me, sometimes just me. So this year, Lieutenant Watton was like, "You gonna go have your beer at the memorial next?" And I was like, "I gotta make one more stop." And I'm going there. You know, and it's just you know, Jaimie's not buried anywhere; he was cremated, and so it's a place that I feel like I can go to just kind of honor him. I mean, I can honor him anywhere, but you know, it's a place where his name is on the wall and his legacy is engraved in this community. And, you know, going back to those bags that cops had put in that car for us. So when Trooper Brooke Jones' story was added to the memorial wall, we recreated those care bags for her family members as they went to have her name added to the memorial. And we had those sitting in their chairs for that memorial service when her name was added. And, you know, we add things. So we did that for her. We did that for Firefighter Remberg. Loves Park or North Park?
North Park.
And we did that for Corporal Carlson
Helicopter.
from the Marines, who was killed, for his family. And that was one thing we realized, that we've kind of swooped in and tried to help other first responders is Illinois cops is specific to law enforcement, and they come in and swoop in and lift these families up, thank God, you know, and walk them through these very interesting, you know, services and all the things you have to do and memorials that you go to and are involved in that you would have no idea unless you've been put in this situation. And firefighters don't have that, from what I know. They don't have someone to come in and swoop in and make their family a care package for, you know, the procession that they're going to have to sit in for maybe even up to a couple of hours like we did, you know, and military doesn't have that either. So we made care packages for each of Nathan Carlson's family members, Brooke Jones Story's family members, Remberg's family members, and in there we just put like mints, granola bars, Advil, tissues, little small bottle of water, and we try to do something personal. We did that for Canine Nix also earlier last year, and try to put something personal in there. So we put like an amethyst angel that you can hang on to, because somebody had given me a little coin I could hang on to during Jaimie's services, and I found myself clinging to it.
Like gripping it.
Yeah, like gripping it, just having something to do with your hands, right? You're so nervous, you got so much anxiety, you're sad. Something that you can hang on to, it's small, you know, you get a lot of big memorabilia when something like this goes on, but something small that I could put in my pocket every day when I went to work, you know, and we made some coins like that for Canine Nix. And
symbols mean a lot to both fire and police and EMS and military. I mean, you know, and quite frankly, the whole country is built on symbols. I mean, our flag is a symbol. The Statue of Liberty is a symbol. Yep. What was a symbol that came out of, you know, the loss of Jaimie Cox that you really identify with, you know, either one of you that you hold tight to now?
The blue line.
Yeah, I mean, the blue line for sure. And I think, you know, the flag means a lot more. I get real frustrated when people try to put down the blue line flag specifically, or the red line flag, for any reason. I mean, they want to say it's like taking the American flag and doing something.
Like you're desecrating it, but
right, you're not supposed to do that. But it's just such a different, and it's, you know, obviously 2020, we saw a change in the country, and blue line flags were then seen as this, you know, horrible symbol, and you must be this if you're supporting, if you are, you know, are wearing a blue line flag.
We don't, just so we're clear, we don't tolerate that on this show or in this brand.
Yeah.
Sorry, we stand behind the blue 100,000%. And I know that that's more than you can do, but at least we do 100%. So to be clear.
But it just doesn't mean that. That's the frustrating thing. Like,
this
we don't
is my
even family. Like, my family laid down their life for this line.
Yeah, we're at a point now where I'm not even going to have I'm not going to waste the time in those who want to shout against, you know, the effort of law enforcement. You know, you cannot even describe appropriately. And I think that one of the things that you had said just a minute ago, where you were clinging to that coin, and you're probably doing it at a time, which I'm assuming that you were doing it at a time when the loss was, you know, so fresh. And some of that, I'm going to insert a little bit that you're probably feeling like, I want to be able to know that I'm representing Jaimie the best that I can. Yep. I'm now standing.
Even still.
You're standing there. You're standing there, and you want him to be standing there, and you're standing there representing himself, and you just want to do it in the best way that you possibly can. And so I can imagine you in that moment gripping that coin, and being, tense about it.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of pressure. I mean, I can only I can't imagine that pressure. I've seen the loss. I haven't personally experienced it. I've seen it out in the career that I've done. I can tell you that from the firefighter perspective is that we know when something very bad has happened, when the police officers themselves put their own members in the back of a squad car and go peeling off to the ER ahead of the fire even being able to get on scene.
Which is what happened.
Yeah, I know. And that's why I bring that up, is because that's just reactionary. That's and in a positive way. We would come in and go, we want to be able to provide any law enforcement or firefighter or EMT the best chance of survival in the back of our ambulance. But the criticality of it is get them to an emergency room now.
Yeah.
Do it now.
Well, and the
because
hospital was 2 blocks away.
Right.
Thankfully.
It was very, very, very close. But we understand the sense of urgency, and we understand that the loss to our public service members, our law enforcement especially, you can't replace it. There's no replacement for Jaimie. No. And there will always be the next, wave of law enforcement personnel that come on. But they won't know, they'll know things, life from their perspective. Jaimie had already done, that's why I said, he had done so much already as a younger person, given his military background, his education, going into law enforcement, being an outdoorsman, being a family man. He had already accomplished, and he, should have been able to accomplish so much more. And that's what we want to drive home. And now you guys are carrying that flag forward through the Jaimie Cox Foundation and Blue 815. And you're doing tremendous good for those who need it the most. And we want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Trying.
Yeah. One of the things that we know here is that first responders we're not paid for what we do. We're paid for what we have to do or what we might do. That's playing out all the time. It's the might, if it is the insurance policy. And many of them pay with their lives. And anyone that disrespects that, that's where we kind of say,
right.
I'm not here to have that conversation. Let's talk about how to make the community better.
Correct. Yeah.
And
I think that's where we try to focus too. What were your symbols? I think the only other one I have is 68, which is Jaimie's badge number. Yeah. And I see 68 everywhere.
And anytime I see a 68, I'm sending it.
Yeah. It's crazy. Weird number that you would think you wouldn't see a lot.
I see it on a lot of Harley Davidson motorcycles. I see it on like the windshields or a fender. 68 and I'm sure you already know, just for those that are listening and viewing, is that Jaimie Cox, he was the 7th Rockford police officer that was killed in the line of duty since going back all the way to 1917. And so, and you talked about Jaimie being on the wall at the Winnebago County 9/11 Emergency Responders Memorial, and we hate putting another person on that wall.
Yeah.
But the fact that you pay tribute in the way that you do, and also all the things that you do throughout every day of every year, it sounds like you guys are doing amazing work.
Thanks.
I think you guys what have you raised so far in terms of dollars, but then you also give back to scholarships, right?
So Blue 815, I mean, I don't even have our numbers, how much we've raised, but a lot.
It's steadily grown.
Yeah.
Right.
I think we're probably well over the $100,000 mark at this point, collectively. We had our 5-year anniversary of officially being an organization, a 501c3 organization this past year. And then Jaimie Cox Foundation. Jaimie Cox Foundation is run by my family. A lot of our family sits on the board. I do not sit on the board just because I have this thing going on. And we don't want to have any issues with that.
Okay.
But I do obviously help with a lot of their events and kind of represent the foundation whenever I can. And they started out so there was a memorial fund created in the wake of Jaimie's loss, like that week, that people were going and donating to for Caitlin, to use as needed. And, you know, a lot of people want to look at the insurance policy that, you know, Caitlin, you know, may or may not have gotten money from the city or whatever, however all of that works. Like, that's all protocol. That's not Caitlin making a decision to do this or that. That's in place. How it works, you know? Yeah. And so, you know, but there was I think it was 7 months, July 12th of 2018 is when the investigation was finally finalized.
Sure.
So from November till July, you know, she's sitting in limbo.
Yeah, life goes on.
There's no money coming in for her, you know, at that phase. She's just sitting in limbo waiting for these investigation results to be completed. And the investigation was very tricky because the body cams were not required at that time. Very few Rockford squad cars were, you know, had dash cams in them. His did not. And so it was a lot of detective work had to go into that investigation. And so it took a long time, and it was frustrating for everybody because Caitlin couldn't move forward. She couldn't get a death certificate and to handle his things, you know. And so this memorial fund kind of was started for her. And then, you know, I don't have no idea how much was ever contributed to it. Quite a bit, I'm pretty sure. And you know, from there, it was kind of like after everything settled, you know, as a family, we decided we wanted to move forward to carry Jaimie's legacy on and help in ways that he would have wanted to help. And so the Jaimie Cox Foundation was created from that memorial fund. That's kind of how that moved into place. And so the Jaimie Cox Foundation focuses on helping veterans, first responders, and then underprivileged children are kind of their pillars that they work under. And we focus mostly on law enforcement, but like I said, we've kind of dipped into some other areas where we see a need for support that, you know, just isn't set up. And while I would love to swoop in and start an organization to handle, you know, the way that cops does for police, I'd love to set that up for fire. Like, I can't be the one to do it. I don't have the time to take all that on.
Right.
But you know, there's a need for it. There's a need for it for fire and for military, and you know, until then, we're happy to support in our community the way that we can. You know, when other first responders need the help, we'll swoop in. You know.
Yeah, and we do, you know, stand for that a lot on this, and behind this brand is the idea that you're going to get far more benefit out of communities coming together and helping each other out. You're going to get more out of the reliance of organizations, police, fire, EMS, creating peer support groups, creating the volunteer aspect within your own organization for like-minded people to help those who are also like-minded but also struggling. And we are very clear about things, I think, where we get pushed back, and there's always this person out there that's wanting to say, you know, well, I'm tired of having the conversation about mental health and whatever. And it's like, well, until people, you know, stop struggling the way that they are struggling, and the statistics prove that, we're going to keep beating that drum pretty hard. And that goes back to forming organizations, forming foundations, 501c3s, give back programs, volunteerism, things of that nature. It's great to make a buck, but if I can give back in some fashion, that's going to be a far greater paycheck.
Yeah.
And we try to do that as much as we can. And we have appreciated this conversation, the journey that, you know, you guys unfortunately have to go through. And I'm just curious, you know, Livia, as you sit here with Andrea, how is Blue 815 carrying that forward from the Jaimie Cox Foundation through the 815?
I think one of the other items that we offer are grants through Blue 815. And so there are law enforcement out who, the departments only can pay for so much of training, and so a lot of our officers pay for additional trainings out of their pocket. And so one of the ideas we had is, I think we need to develop a way we can provide grants to help fiscally cover some of that out-of-pocket costs. In the long run, that benefits the community. They're taking additional trainings that are needed to keep us safe. And so I think that's a good example of, kind of living up to one of the pillars. And we consider what's happening at the time too. So, we didn't start with the grant idea, and it's just something as time goes on, we see what else we're capable and able to provide.
Yeah. It's the grassroots, and then, the flowers start blooming and you realize what you can do beyond.
And what's needed.
Yeah.
We didn't know before.
Sometimes get some ideas that are like way too big.
Throw it out. You never know.
I love this, but I don't know how we would accomplish it. Yeah. So we give out the grants to the first responders we have an application on our website that, it's fairly simplistic because we know law enforcement doesn't want to have to write an essay or anything. And then we also have, the Jaimie Cox Foundation then does, you mentioned scholarship. They do a scholarship for 2 Hononegah High School seniors. That's where Jaimie went to high school. Me too.
Yep.
And that's given out every May. And so this year we gave out, I think, our 13th and 14th grants for that. So that's $14,000 that has been, given out in scholarship money. And that scholarship is funded through the Jaimie Cox Foundation. They sponsor half of it, and then the Rockton Police Association sponsors the other half. And they're actually the ones that kind of hold the scholarship and run it for us, which is really nice. And that's really a cool way. Like, I've given the scholarship away a handful of times. And, we're at a place now where the kids graduating don't really remember what happened with Jaimie. They were pretty young when everything happened. For the first few years, they all were very aware. But it's just really cool because that's something he would just absolutely love, is like that he gets to help kids go to school.
Sure.
And become, they have to be going into a field of service, public service. We really focus on kids that need the financial help. And so that's part of the rubric that goes into deciding who gets it each year, is the need for that family to help their kids go to school. So that's been really cool to be a part of also, is seeing that scholarship given away every year. And then every time we get an application for our grant through Blue 815, I just get really excited to talk about, this is what this officer wants to do. And, can't wait to write the check and send it out to them. So,
yeah. Well, I can tell you that Original Firefighter, we support law enforcement as a whole, Blue 815, Jaimie Cox Foundation, and thank you so much for that story that only you can tell. I mean, that's the only way we can see it, is that, we appreciate that. What we're going to do real quick here is we're going to do a little toast to Jaimie. So here you go to badge.
He would be
68.
Sad if I wasn't drinking the brown.
And here's to all.
To Jaimie.
Cheers to Jaimie.
Thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
You're welcome. As we move into our final segment of the show, and as I just pour a little bit more of the Heaven Hill, we do appreciate the bourbon on the show too. And so this is going to be...
You need to get a bourbon sponsor.
Well,
you have one?
Well, we work on many things.
Look into that.
We work on many things. But as we go, kind of for those who are listening and viewing, I mean, we can only imagine. As I had, asked about the support, and I had made reference, was it too much? Was it the right amount? Was it not enough? It sounds like it was on point. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It was on point.
Yeah, and it has continued to be pretty great.
Yeah.
The fact that we can, a lot of people told us so the first event we ever did was a 5K. Actually, the first event we did was a motorcycle rally, but the 5K had come in planning before that. And, when we kind of got started, my brother kind of runs the show on that. And he's like, yeah, people said we'd get 5 years, if we can get 5 years. And that was the biggest fundraiser that we did at the time. And we just did our 7th one. It must have been our 7th one in October, and still had, well over 300 people signed up to run for Jaimie and to honor him. And that's awesome. Our motorcycle rally started in August of 2018. And again, we were thinking like maybe we go 5,
Yeah.
It's still growing. We had the biggest amount of bikes and vehicles in this year's rally, which is awesome.
Yeah.
It's so fun. You got to hold your breath through the whole thing.
Oh my gosh. Does that take off and end at crazy times?
Starts at actually the Roscoe VFW has hosted us for the takeoff the last couple of years. They have a lot of space with the business next door. We can utilize their parking lot. And they actually, because Jaimie's a veteran, love to support him, and they provide a breakfast for all of our participants. And it's been a really cool event. I'm part of planning that with Caitlin. And then the Steel Pigs, the Rockford Steel Pigs Motorcycle Club. And so, we do a route through Ogle County. Mount Morris is one of the stops we make every year. So obviously that's special to our family and to Jaimie's life. But it's just so cool that, we did year 6 and we were like, so do we plan year 7? Like, I guess we can't not. We're still growing. And the band that we've had the last few years, which is Blue Steel, super supportive of first responders and military and things like that. And we have to book them in advance to get them if we want them. So we kind of have to make sure we're in for the next year, the year we're in. So we're in for this year, August of this year.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
We wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
As I attempt to stick the landing with you guys, I'm going to try to go down a road of a true enjoyment beyond what we've discussed.
Okay.
And I did a little homework. I have a feeling that you are really a dog lover, and maybe a sled dog.
I am.
Sled dog race lover.
I'm very into dog sledding. Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna have a conversation briefly here about and I want to make sure I'm saying it right. The Iditarod.
Iditarod. Mm-hmm.
So the Iditarod Trail Sled Dog Race occurs in Alaska.
It does.
And how many times have you been?
Twice.
Yes.
I went in 2022.
Okay.
Which was the year I turned 40. So I decided it was the 50th running of the race and my 40th birthday. So I made it happen.
Congratulations.
And then
it's a milestone.
Thanks. Yeah. I went with 2 teachers that I actually teach Iditarod, that I've taught Iditarod with for a long time. And then I decided to apply to be the teacher on the trail for the Iditarod after I went and became a finalist. I was a top 3 finalist in 2023 for the 2024 Iditarod.
This was amazing.
So I got to go back to Alaska in 2023 as a finalist and got a ton of cool opportunities. I didn't win, unfortunately. It was also a hard pill to swallow, but it was such a cool opportunity. I can't wait to go back.
And we, because we want to educate. Like,
yeah.
What were you going to teach, or what was it that you were attempting to land there?
Iditarod is a big top, like a unit, I guess, of study or a thing that you can bring into your classroom to teach about. And the Iditarod race kind of relies on educators across the world to teach about it in their classrooms.
Yeah,
because
it's the world's most challenging winter event.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Alaska is the only place that they can have, the only state that's big enough to have 1,000-mile race in one direction.
From Anchorage to Nome.
Mm-hmm.
Nome. Sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's okay.
Nome.
Yeah, I love talking about it. I geek out.
So from Anchorage to Nome is 1,000 miles. It's a little shy.
It's a little
like
shy.
979 miles, something like that.
Yeah, it depends on if they do 2 routes. There's a northern route and a southern route.
Right.
And they're a little bit off in mileage, but they just estimated up to, they actually say it's 1,049 miles. The 1,000 is the estimated, and the 49 is because it's the 49th state.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
See, I like symbols.
Yeah.
I do.
Have you been to Alaska?
I have not yet.
It's your kind of place.
I do quite a bit of traveling, but I have not made it up there yet.
You should go.
Okay.
It's very cool.
All right. Moving. Yeah. I'm gonna go there.
Yeah. So anyway, the Teacher on the Trail program is through the Iditarod. So when I first started learning about this whole thing, I knew nothing. And within a few years, I was like, man, they put a teacher on the trail every year. Now, this person does not like run a team of dogs. They get, they're kind of an ambassador for education. And do like blog posts with lesson ideas based around the race and the sport of mushing. And they get to start in Anchorage by riding in one of the sleds at the ceremonial start. And then they get flown to various checkpoints along the race and end up in Nome. And typically the Teacher on the Trail gets to hand out what they call the Red Lantern Award, which is the award for the last musher to come in.
I assume you've been to Anchorage.
Been to Anchorage, yeah.
You've been to Nome?
Haven't been to Nome.
Not been there.
Next bucket list thing, you know. So yeah, I went to Anchorage the first year. So they do an educators conference every year that butts up to the start of the race. So if you participate in the educators conference, you get a lot of perks. If it's not COVID time, which it was the first year I went, and it kind of put a damper on some things, but you get to go to the musher meet and greet, and you get to meet all these people, and these people, like, they're like my football team. Like, it's like if I were a Packers fan meeting Aaron Rodgers, you know?
You're like, football Sunday, you're like, I don't care. There's a dog. Where's the dog race at?
Yeah, I'm constantly streaming dog races from Alaska, but so yeah, I got to go. So the first year we went to just the ceremonial start, and to be standing in the middle of all that mix and walking around and meeting people that we've had only read about and watched was surreal, super cool. Alaska is enchanting. It's such an incredible place. And then the next year when I went back, so they do a ceremonial start on this first Saturday in March. And then Sunday is what they call the restart, which is like the actual start of the race where they take off and head to Nome.
Sure.
And that's about an hour north of Anchorage. So I got to experience that in 2023 and actually was asked to be a musher's like handler for their team. So I got to kind of go behind the scenes, and I got to take one of the dog teams up, and whoa, they are so powerful. I mean, you talk about 14 sled dogs pulling you through ice. Somehow I didn't land on my face, but it was quite a cool experience for sure.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Livia, you and I are going to put Andrea through what we call the machine on Original Firefighter. The machine, what is it? It's 5 questions. You answer if you can. If you can't, just pass on.
She doesn't have to do it? I have to.
She's your support.
I get to play,
She's your support. So,
wingman.
Yeah. So here's the deal. We've already established that the Iditarod, right? Mm-hmm. Trail is sled dog race in Alaska. It's the most famous sled dog race, and it's the world's most challenging winter event. Happens in Alaska, goes from Anchorage to Nome. It's about 1,000 miles, give or take on either side. So here's a couple questions, and you've already
gotten. If I don't know the
answer,
answer, I'm gonna feel like such an idiot.
Yeah, we're gonna see. We're gonna see.
You got this.
Yeah. Otherwise, we'd be like, yeah. See, now we know. You should have.
Do you have the answers?
Well, I mean,
in case I get it wrong.
Maybe.
Okay. All right.
Good thing you didn't know about it before.
Well, we'll go with an easy one. How many dogs are to a typical sled team? How many dogs? You already said.
It is now back up to 16 as of last year. It was at 14 for a few years.
Okay.
Now they are back up to 16.
So it can go up to 16. And you already said it's super powerful. Are they just like anxious to get going?
Yes.
Yeah.
It's very loud. It's amazing. I just watched a race the other day that started, and they had a mass start, which is when they all start at the same time. And it's so loud with the dogs barking, and they're jumping, and can't wait to get going. And then the second they're told they can go, it's silent. It's so weird. And all you hear is the sled going across the snow.
Really? How many sled teams are there typically? I have no idea.
In the Iditarod?
Yeah.
The last few years, it's been about 30 to 35, which is pretty low. It's the lowest it's ever been the last few years. probably because of the economy. It's very expensive to run dogs. You don't make a lot of money when you're winning races, typically. And you have to win to make money. So, only about 30 to 35. It was up at one time to like in the 80s.
Wow. Mm-hmm. So the second question is, what month does the race occur in?
March.
Go ahead. March? Mm-hmm. What was the first year that it ran?
Oh, man. 1978.
Come on.
I'm pretty sure.
Should get it.
Come on.
5?
I was born in 1973.
Oh,
March
it was
3rd,
73. You're right. It was 73.
She's got to take a drink.
I should have known that because the 50th running was when I went. It's a good drinking game, though.
See, you can have a drink with her. Okay. So, and I'll do it too. Why not?
Should get more wrong.
All right. Yeah. See, this is why you didn't win.
Right.
This is why there's more wine on the table.
Yeah, there is. There's more. Okay, so if so these races last for days upon end. So, for example, looks like they could go for about 2 weeks, right? Makes sense. They're being pulled by dogs.
Mm-hmm. For 1,000 miles.
The closest finish was in 1978. Mm-hmm. The winning time was 14 days, 18 hours, 52 minutes, and 24 seconds. 14 days, 18 hours, 52 minutes, and 24 seconds.
For that win.
And between looks like here, Dick Mackey and Rick Swanson, how did they determine who won?
Whichever dog's nose crossed the finish line first, because it's a race of dogs and not a race of men.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Nice.
So the winner was decided by the nose of the lead dog across the finish line. These two, Dick Mackey and Rick Swanson. Swanson. Looks like Dick Mackey was the winner.
He was.
And he won by the nose of a dog.
Nose of a dog. Yeah.
When I read that, I was like, come on, that's awesome.
So I got to meet Dick Mackey's son, Jason Mackey. I got a couple pictures with him in 2023 when I was there. He had raced a few years with his brother Lance, who was a grand champion of the Iditarod. He won 4 times, I believe. And Jason was running the year after his brother Lance passed away. And he had run a few times in the years that I had started following with his brother Lance, because Lance had, I think it's called, is it Raynaud's disease, where your fingertips get super cold and on good blood flow.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And so he had Lance had a lot of trouble with his hands. And so his brother Jason would run and kind of stick with him, not run to race necessarily, in order to make sure his brother was taken care of, because the mushers can't have outside help. They can only have help from other mushers in the race. And then the year I met him at his vet checks, he was carrying Lance's ashes down the trail with him, which was really cool.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, so
and his dad, Dick, was one of the people who started the race.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Since you brought up Lance Mackey, so what
Am I ruining your other question?
No, that you're actually helping me tie into it. What is Lance Mackey known for best?
His Iditarod wins and winning the Yukon Quest and the Iditarod in the same year.
That's right.
Twice.
Lance Mackey is a 4-time winner in a row. He won 2007, 8, 9, and 10.
Yep.
And then went on to win the Yukon Quest in 2007 and 2008. Mm-hmm. So he's
Which is another 1,000-mile race.
Yeah. So he's the only musher to have back-to-back wins in the Quest and the Iditarod. Yep. So that's awesome. Cool. You know your stuff. stuff. So, okay, going on to the next question.
Geek out.
I'm trying to help you here. The next question is, what does the Iditarod, what does it commemorate?
Well, I hope you have your answer correct. Because a lot of people think
it's always correct on Original Firefighter.
A lot of people think it commemorates the Serum Run of 1925, but it actually does not. It's meant to commemorate Alaska's heritage in sled dogs and the use of the historic Iditarod Trail.
Okay. I had both answers. So.
Okay, good. Nice. Yeah.
Got to cover bases here.
This is a big confusion that Iditarod is trying to sort out, is that it's not meant to be a race to commemorate the Serum Run of 1925, which this year is the 100th anniversary of that. But they did use similar sections of the trail.
Okay.
In both.
Sure.
And the Serum Run wasn't an event. There. It was a relay run to get antitoxin to Nome.
Yep.
In 1925. Because there's no road system past or trail or railroad or road system past Nenana at that point. And so they had to use dog sleds there was an outbreak of diphtheria, and the kids were dying in Nome, and so they needed the medicine, and that's how they got it there. So it was a big thing too when COVID happened. And they talked about they used a lot of snowmobiles to get the vaccine to these same places, and they did a lot of comparisons to the Serum Run at that time.
Oh my gosh, that's
she
great.
Knows her stuff.
Yeah,
that's great. Okay, we got to have a drink of that. Good Lord, I mean, way to land. I talked about sticking the landing. You just stuck the landing. That's great. Good job.
It's pretty cool. It's very interesting stuff. There's a lot behind it, which is why I'm so fascinated by it.
Well, the last question is. What is who is the 5-time winner claiming victories in 77, 79, 81, 82, and 1991? He's currently the only person to win the Iditarod in 3 different decades. Who is this?
I believe that's Rick Swenson.
It is. It is Rick Swenson.
And then Dallas Seavey beat his number of wins last year and got his 6th Iditarod win.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool.
That is great.
Yeah. A lot of innovation in dog sledding. It's very interesting stuff. Maybe just to me, but
I'm telling you, she should have won.
To this point, I can say you are the first guest we've had on that has such an affinity for mushing and dog sled racing. And I think that that's awesome, because there's a huge part about the Original Firefighter brand, and what we hear, talk about is, what are you doing on your off days? Whether that's being a firefighter, a police officer, a first responder, teachers, thank you for what you do. We really appreciate all that. Livia, and thank you so much for what you're doing with Blue 815 and all the advocacy that you're doing for the communities around our area and everything at the state level as well. We've had a great time with you guys, and I my heart goes out to your foundation, Jaimie Cox Foundation, the Blue 815, your family.
Thank you.
And here at Original Firefighter, we stand with the blue. We always salute you. Remember, the Original Firefighter Podcast is here for your off days, and please stay safe out there. Take care.